Let's do a quick survey before we get started. Who of you is working on an iOS app right now? I am as well. This guy over here as well. I bet that if you're working on an iOS app, that you're hoping that it will be as successful as some of the games that Gamistry has made, such as Munch and recently Gold Diggers. With a title like that, you're bound to be some kind of success, I would say, either in-game or outside of the game. Our speaker today is Aaron Oostdijk. He's a programmer, as well as a musician in the after hours.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he'll introduce himself quite well after me. He's going to talk about what you guys did right, what you guys did that turned out to be quite right.
That's closer to what it actually was.
So let's give a warm welcome to Aaron Oostdijk.
Oh, welcome. It's quite a turn up. I see a lot of familiar faces, some former students, some current students. Who here doesn't know me? Like, I don't have to group everything. That's why I just added this slide 5 minutes ago. I always forget to introduce myself, so I sort of like, oh yeah, wait, I need to do that. So yeah, my name's Aaron Oostdijk. I'm lead programmer at Gamistry, which started in 2009. And there's 5 of us, 5 friends, just the same classmates. Just decided that this was the best course of action. I also lecture at the HKU, still do that, and I'm a musician in a heavy metal band. Makes sense, right? And it's also November, so I don't want to shave anymore. I'm tired of it. So let me just go over the games that we made, sort of introduce what the kind of portfolio that we have. So the first game we made was, it's called Sticky. Does anybody know Sticky? Anybody played it? Does anybody agree that it looks like a casual game but does not play like a casual game? That was the main problem with this game. We released this under Chilingo. Basically it's about a not-so-faceless blob called Sticky who has to save one of his creators and, by extension, the world from the other that has been corrupted by his evil younger brothers, toxins. It's an action defense game, which basically means toxins go from left to right and you have to kill them before they get to the exit. And it looks casual, but it really isn't. Second game we released was self-published, which is Munch. Most people will know this if they're familiar with me and the company. Was originally supposed to be published via Chilingo, which was then acquired by EA, but that didn't go so well, so then we self-published it. It was Game of the Week in over 80 countries, and it's the first real success we had because, and I define that just very statistically as it made more money than it cost to make. I think this is one of the only games so far that we released that's done that. So. Then we released Scrap Tank, which was actually not developed by me, but by the other programmer. After Munch time, we decided to split our company into smaller teams, to more effectively spread our chances. And this is the game that he came up with. This is a game where you fight robot overlords, kind of Terminator Salvation style, and use their scrap metal to improve your tank and kill more of them. So it's more of a core game, but it has casual mechanics in the Infinite Runner. So it's a bit of both. And the last game we made was Gold Diggers, where you literally dig for gold, and many of the characters are inspired by real-world gold diggers. So. And it was new and noteworthy for a week, and it got about 2 million downloads in that time. It is a free game, so obviously you're going to get more downloads, but it's still a really big number. We were kind of surprised to see that happen. So. We're still trying to figure out exactly how to make it better. We just released an update that should make it better. So if you haven't played it yet, try it now because it's out on Android as well. Okay, so I got asked to do something about what, because yeah, obviously we got a whole bunch of downloads for Gold Diggers, so they asked us, oh, can you tell us something about what you guys are doing that is working so well? So I'm like, sure. But the big question is, what have we been doing right? And that's a very difficult question to answer because we're right in the middle of everything. And of course we always, I think everybody's felt like this at some point, right? Casual. I sort of feel like this right now. But what I've been able to at least distill is that there's a central goal, and that is to get people to invest their time in your game. And there are a lot of things that you cannot control, and the one thing that you can control is not giving people a reason not to do this. So don't give people a reason not to invest their time in the game. Try to, at every step of the way, try to get them to be enticed to more. to spend more time in your games, just keep looking. So this is a good quote about that. Time is more valuable than money because you can get more money, you just can't get more time. Time is a limited asset. Okay, some disclaimer. This is not a one-size-fits-all, this is just what we've been doing, and it's up to you to decide if this is going to work for you. There are no guarantees. Even when Apple contacts you, they will say there are no guarantees, and they will keep repeating that until you've registered that. And this is all experiential information. This is what we've experienced, and it's not necessarily what you will experience, but it should at least highlight some of the topics that you can look out for and what you start thinking about. So let's start with what I've labeled the basics, what we think are the basics, the things that we always do. And the first one is super obvious, quality. It's kind of obvious. Does anybody know this movie? It's called Field of Dreams. And the key phrase from this movie is, if you build it, they will come, which is not true for the App Store. But necessarily, quality is still key. If you don't have quality, everything else basically falls flat. So sadly, if you build a really good game, it is not a guarantee that people will play it, because 2/3 of the apps in the store are what people call zombies. And a zombie app is an app with very little or no downloads on a daily basis. And it's definitely not something you can run a business on. So yeah, so quality is key. And the idea is that they might come if you play the cards right. And that's pretty much what I'm trying to talk about today. So the first thing you have to do is know who your audience is. This is the kind of response you want to have. You want to have true appreciation for the things you do, not just from your end users, but also from press, and preferably also from Apple. Because when Apple called us, they were really happy that we made a quality product, because that sells their platform, and they're really down to earth about that, so that's really nice. So the first thing you have to do is figure out who your audience really is. And like I said, it's not just end users, it's also press and Apple, and they are not the same people. They don't look for the same things, and they don't have the same goals. And one of the things we've found in our games is that we always sort of strike a balance between novelty and recognizability, which means novelty, we always try to be new enough to be interesting for press and Apple. But we try to be recognizable so as not to scare away xenophobic users, because our audience is basically everybody and their mom. That's what we target our games for. It's not always the best idea, but that's what we do. So we have to have a recognizable mechanic. It has to be pick up and play for your mom, not pick up and play for a regular gamer. So yeah, you have to have a very broad audience and a very broad appeal. And important to remember that these different groups don't always agree. Gold Diggers is a good fit for that. Critics see it as a 64 on Metacritic, but it has a 4.5 rating at the moment on the store itself. So customers like this game. Critics are not super happy about it. We understand it's a runner. They've seen plenty of runners. But it works for customers, and that's essentially our end goal. Next thing, Apple's review system. They mostly test for broad scope functionality, like does your app actually work? Stuff like that. Can they leave it on overnight? Will it not crash after 2 days? And they test the really important stuff like in-app purchases that are, if they don't work, are going to piss off a whole lot of people. So that's the kind of stuff they check, and obviously their own branding, if you're using the right logos and stuff. But they don't really go in depth with your game. Do not expect them to find bugs. They will not find them. Two glaring things they didn't find with our games was an iCloud save problem, that if you restarted the game, all your save data was gone, which really pissed people off, especially after they purchased something, which is, kind of inexcusable. And a crash when you ran a game with Wi-Fi, or without Wi-Fi. So we found out that they test their games on Wi-Fi. So if you turn it off and it crashes, they probably won't find that. Stuff like that. So don't expect them to find anything. Have your own QA. Now, then you get to the store, and this is roughly the kind of thing that users are going to be seeing. If you have a feature graphic, they'll be seeing that, and I have an example of one of ours in a sec. The important parts are definitely your icon, your name, and the promo art, screenshots, and trailers. Trailers less so because, well, if they don't get past the first few, they might not actually check out the trailer. But the icon is really important because this is, especially for new and noteworthy, the only thing that people actually saw for gold diggers was the icon and the name. And they were hey, gold diggers, it's mostly about people like trying to get people's money, but then it's sort of about a digging thing, so what the hell is this? It just makes people wonder like, okay, what is this about? And then we had a trailer with a gold digger character that was actually literally digging for gold. So stuff like that actually helps. But pick these things carefully and think about what you can do with this. One thing we do with all the screenshots, they're not literally screenshots, they are sort of touched up screenshots with hints, like, okay, this is what the game is about. And actually one thing that you see here is that there's a trail behind Sticky. I don't know if you've played Sticky and you make a screenshot of it, it's super hard to see what's happening in that game because a static screenshot just does not convey movement. So we tried to add some movement to the screenshot so it actually communicated more clearly what the actual experience was like. So a factual screenshot does not necessarily portray the actual game experience, and you want your screenshots to portray the actual game experience. That's one thing you can try. But yeah, very important. And description, yeah, TLDR is a well-known issue there. What we try to do is we try to promote scanning, which like, okay, if you look at a piece of text, a few things, key phrases are instantly recognizable, and you actually read them without even trying to read them. That's what we try to do. If you really have to dig through a text to get at the information you want to have, then your text is probably too long or too convoluted. So what we do is we have titled paragraphs with fragments that promote scanning. Okay, next basic is guidelines, not rules, guidelines. And I mean the Apple developer guidelines. If you don't know what they are, I suggest you go find out right away. And follow them. You just do. There's just no reason not to. And if you do not follow them, then you have to rework stuff, so it'll take longer. So figure out what the guidelines are and do them right off the bat. And especially the important ones like in-app purchase, because it's about user experience. If you piss off Apple by not following a guideline, well, they'll just tell you to revise your game or whatever. But if you piss off a user, he's not going to be that forgiving. He's going to nail you to the wall, basically. So if you don't, your chances of a feature also go down. There are certain things in the Apple guidelines which are more guidelines than rules. Other things are more rules than guidelines, so it's a little vague. But they're less likely to feature you if you do things wrong according to their guidelines. And if you do something really wrong, you won't even pass certification, but that's less. Okay, so the next thing, features. This is a bad example. Everybody knows the term featureitis. I assume something you want to avoid. But the iOS crowd is really hot for features. They love features. They love them so much that they even expect them to be in games that were released a year before the features came out. That's very nice. We often get comments like, okay, does this support this latest feature? Or does this support the Retina? When we released Sticky, people were like, oh, why doesn't it support Retina? I'm like, the game was released a year ago. Retina just came out last week. But yeah, features are really important. However, you should always consider them wisely. Only add them if they benefit your user experience. If they don't, just don't add them. And if a feature precludes you from running on older devices, think very hard if you really need them. Some games coming out now only work on iOS 7 because they support, they use that new sprite system, which is, I guess, fine, but that really limits your end user base. And especially if you want a large user base, then that's probably not a good idea. So we always target the lowest end device and just assume that people all have that with the oldest supported iOS version and work from there. Okay, so and then the next one's interesting. Thursday, not Friday, everybody knows Purple Black. We've always released our games on Thursday, and I've recently heard that some people think this is a myth, and that might actually be true. This is something we picked up from Chilingo. And as I said, it's more convention than law. A lot of big publishers have been doing this, just like Chilingo. But because the big publishers have been doing this, there are other parties like Touch Arcade, which are regularly checking for stuff on Thursday. Like they run their Touch Arcade Play stuff on Thursday. They check on Thursday if there's new games, and then they post about it. So. And that's why we also release on Thursday, because your time being new is limited, so you might as well maximize that visibility by bringing it out exactly at the time that people are checking. So, it's up to you. Who knows, maybe it's a myth, you should try it. Another basic is this idea. This is reality. It's like, okay, if there's this giant monstrosity and you try to fight up to that, probably not a good idea. It's romantic to win out against a big player, but it's not a good business strategy. And that's essentially what you want to do if you want to be successful in the store. And of course you don't have control over this. You don't really know what everybody else is up to unless you work with the NSA. So for the love of God, avoid holiday seasons like the plague. Release things when nobody else is releasing something. And when you do release something, be ready for everything. Figure out what people need before they need it, and figure out who that is that's going to need something from you. Be it press, be it Apple, be it whoever. So yeah, first have the materials ready before people ask you for them so you can give it to them right away and find out who they are and what they need. So one of the big things that we picked up is also, of course, the App Store marketing guidelines. But we actually picked this we started from Chalingo's marketing stuff. They have this one massive master folder with all the crap you'll ever need, and we sort of stick to that, so that works for us. And if you're always ready with everything, then you build a reputation for being ready, which is basically what saved us with Apple. Because we got this, which is very nice. Basically, we had Munch time in the pipeline to be released. We'd uploaded it to Apple, and they contacted us like, hey, can you release it 2 weeks early? Like, sure. We didn't really know if we could make that, but we already had all the marketing stuff ready, so we basically said, yeah, whatever. They pushed it through the review pipeline. We gave them all the marketing materials, and 3 days later, this was on the storefront. So, yeah, very nice. Fun fact, Holland wasn't one of these. Holland was one of the only countries that did not feature us as Game Boy.
Oh.
It's ironic, but that's the way it is. All right, so that's basically the end of the basics, which I think are the basics. Next up, marketing pre-release, what we do, what you can do, what you can try. Most important thing is to inform people. Do not hide in a cave somewhere. So we've tried, we have done this. We have hidden in caves for like 3 years now. But as soon as we stopped doing this, things improved. People started knowing us. People stopped thinking we were this super corporate entity, because we're not. We're just 5 guys making a game. Nothing fancy. And as an indie, having people know you and your games, so not just your games, but also you, is essential to your survival. And why would you let this ride on this one small time frame called release? You know, just do it early if you can, if you're comfortable with that. Now, one place we always start is Touch Arcade. Does anybody know Touch Arcade? Yes, some people know Touch Arcade. Does anybody read Touch Arcade? Okay, no. This is their post forum for upcoming iOS games. You can make your own topic here. There are some rules, so I suggest you read them, but you can make your own topic. And you should post here regularly with updates about development, but don't bump, that's against the rules again. And you can ask people stuff to give feedback. So like one of the things we did was this graphic on the left. We wrote some concept and asked people, okay, can you give us feedback about this stuff? We did some icon selection and which icons do you guys like better or whatever. Do you have ideas for character spec, perks and stuff like that? And there's a lot of smart people on this forum, so they really know what they're talking about. Second thing, test flight, betas, that's very useful. It's easier on Android than it is on iOS because you can have 100 test devices as a normal iOS developer, which kind of limits your flexibility for beta testing. So then you have to go out and give your game physically to people and test like that. That works as well. But you can have 100 devices, more if you're a business account holder. And you can only clear this list once a year. It's not like, okay, I add 100 people for this beta test and remove them next week and add 100 more. No, they stick there until the end of the year. So don't just add your dog and all his friends, because people that you know aren't the most trustworthy test subjects if you're looking for the kind of hard critique that you need to improve your work. So yeah, look for people that are very likely to be honest with you. That's a good idea. And add a feedback button so people can actually give you feedback. That's a good idea. And consider having a rewards program. Beta testers, not all of them are completely altruistic. They like to see the game you're making, but they like to get something in return as well. Second thing pre-release is get in touch with press a lot. It's a good idea. This requires some explaining. Go to a trade show, that helps. And if you get in touch with them, they'll remember you, hopefully, if you're memorable. It's one of the things. If you meet them in person, they will be more likely to remember you because they get spammed by a lot of people they don't know all the time. You need to consider this. So show them your colorful personality that basically comes with the job of being an indie in a very well, unforgiving environment sometimes. And just put a face and a story to the games, because you are news just as much as your games are news. You're trying your best. You're basically a permanent underdog, so use that to your advantage. They like this, they like to hear about you. And yeah, just go meet them. And be consistent about your material, because branding is important. My best Aaron Paul person. Have easy access, low maintenance baseline materials. This is, later on I have something that'll at the handy stuff list. Press kit's a good one for something like this. Have a very consistent, this is all the material that we can send to everybody, and then they'll basically be happy. So that gives you more time to give something extra to the people that you've actually met, so that they reinforce your contact with them, and they're more likely to write about you because you've given them something exclusive. So that's what we do pre-release. How about post-release? We have a roadmap. What is a roadmap? Well, roadmap is basically all of these questions answered. Who's going to do what, where, when, and very importantly, why are you going to do something post-release? Sometimes people forget to ask why, and also how. So are you going to do updates? You're going to do what's going to be the content of these updates? Who are you going to talk to? Why? When? Whatever. Some very important things about updates as well. Don't rely on updates. Have enough content at launch, especially if you're a premium game. That's essential. Also remember, reviews don't get updates, like Metacritic. It's just not in their nature. They don't do this. So critical receptions are final. If you mess it up day one, you're basically done, critical reception-wise. And updates can generate influxes, and the cost effectiveness of this depends on the monetization you have. Like I said, a premium game with updates depends if it's going to work. If you have a lot of in-app stuff and you have a large user base already that's sort of actively represented, then it'll give you a more effective, cost-effective update strategy. But don't confuse cost effectiveness with usefulness. Some people tend to do that, like they think, yeah, it costs like $5,000 to make this update, and we made like nothing from this. But that might still be a good idea because the update might still be useful to keep people interested. So don't confuse cost effectiveness with usefulness. And if you do decide to update regularly, and consider why you are. That's an important question. And also what we do is an interesting one. We give people rewards for keeping a game installed. So if you install the game, we have like a local flag that we set, okay, this person has version 1.0 installed, and then when they upgrade to version 1.1 and 1.0 is installed, we give them like, thanks for keeping it installed, here's some free gold, stuff like that. And try to communicate that up front. And you can also do that with daily rewards or whatnot. So, stuff like that works. Then post-release, something you are going to run into is people that sell this. If you make something great, people will contact you about user acquisition. It's just one of the things I've run into that I'm not super happy about. So I thought maybe I should warn you. A lot of people know that having a quality game doesn't give you a lot of users, and that's why there are whole businesses dedicated to the idea of selling you users. But you really need to think about what kind of game you're running if you want to do that, yes or no. Because there's two types of games that I've basically put on opposite ends of the spectrum. There's high and low volume games. It's not just about how many users you have, it's how many users you need. And these are some numbers that you run into. Does anybody know these acronyms? It's a very convoluted system. It's called daily average revenue per paying user. And the important part of that is average revenue per user. The second one is CPC, is cost per click, and the third one is CPI, cost per install. That's basically the lingo that advertisers use when they're selling you users. And a common thing is that you literally pay sometimes $1 to $3 for every user they bring to your game, which is ridiculous. If you have a 99-cent game, you might think it's ridiculous. But there are a lot of people that make at least 5 to 10, maybe even more per user, and only have like 2,000 daily active users. So that's like, oh great, if I pay you $1, I get $5. Excellent, let's work. But for us, it's the exact opposite. We make a lot less per user, but we have huge user bases. So if we do something like this, it's basically commercial suicide. So the bottom line is don't kill yourself. Don't do it. It's just a bad idea. There's pride in being killed by somebody else, you know, like a competition, but killing yourself with UA is just silly. So don't do it. Well, then I've got this big category about general advice, like don't stop there. Just some general advice not related to the other three subjects. First thing is make your own game. Battle Duty Modern Field 3. Anybody know this gem actual game of a game? It's genius. But it's mostly about this. Something he said a few weeks back. He was actually talking about competition, but it's for us, it's more about the state of mobile markets today. If you do the same thing as others, if you copy other people, there's a lot of people that do that. You don't really want to do that too much because it will wear you out. It's not a very nice thing creatively. And if you are a creative person like we are, you need to walk a fine line in that sense. So. Second thing, impulse users. Think like this. This is not necessarily always a good thing. The biggest difference between the iOS App Store and Steam is that Steam constantly reminds you of the actual price of a game by marking it down and showing you exactly what you're gaining, whereas the App Store basically just lowered its standards. Everything is 99 cents. And users now have absolutely no idea what a game is actually worth, which is a problem, because it circumvents user investment. It doesn't breed loyal customers, and exactly, if they don't know what the price of your product is, well, then they're probably not going to know the value of the product either, which brings me to this quote that I thought of at that point. A lot of people know this, I assume. Oscar Wilde, very interesting. A cynic is a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. This goes for a lot of App Store users. They know the price of everything, which is free. At least it should be, but it's not true. What you see with price versus satisfaction, there was this article on Gamistry from somebody that basically registered that if you increase price, average customer satisfaction goes up, because you cut out a lot of impulse users that are very likely to not really care about your game anyway. So if you increase price, you might not have as much users, but you still make the same amount of money, and your average appreciation of users actually rises. So there's this balance between how high can the price go before it's basically not worth it anymore. And well, if you make it really high, then you have 100% customer satisfaction because you have no customers. So, yeah, that's the end point, so that's the limit. Don't do that, that's a bad idea. But don't make it free if it doesn't need to be free. Okay, another one, ask for reviews. The first one, bad, is also mostly related to the App Store guidelines. If you do that, rate 5 stars and get free gold. It's an incentivized rating system, and that's basically a no. You can do it, but they'll basically not like you and you probably won't get featured. Good thing is to rate 5 stars and support a great game. Don't beg. Don't be like, please rate it. But you have to be honest, because you do need ratings, and you need to ask people for ratings, because people are more likely to rate from a negative experience than they are from a positive experience, so you need to reinforce them just after they've had a positive experience. Okay, please rate our game. And that's also why you don't need to ask the wrong people, because if somebody's just had a negative experience, and you then ask very kindly for a positive review, they'll really burn you. So don't do that. So figure out a way to track which users are positive in your game, and when you figure out, okay, this is a positive user, then ask them to review. And one thing we always expect by default is a 1 to 10 ratio between 1-star and 5-star reviews, which means for every 10 I love you so much reviews, you will get 1 I hope you die. Just expect that. And on that note, be ready for criticism. You will get an incomprehensible amount of vitriol just for trying to entertain people. It's not even the price of a cup of coffee, and they will basically write stuff like this. This is from Sticky, actually. But yeah, like it says, give them a mask and he will tell you the truth, and the internet is the biggest, most ubiquitous mask on the world. So you will see that. It's not all like this, of course, but this can be a little disheartening. Don't focus on this, but be ready for it. It's because haters are gonna hate, right? And even free games get hate because time is more valuable than money. If you waste somebody's time, even if they haven't spent money, they're still gonna not like you. But yeah, there we go. And just a side note, in this case it is true, If you build it, they will come. If you build something of good quality, you will get spam. It will just happen. All right, so wrapping up. Once you've been featured, what will you hopefully have? A direct line to Apple. If you get a high enough feature, you get a direct email contact, and you can just talk to them when you're doing stuff, and that makes everything so much easier. And the goal is the way to get that is to get them to call you, obviously, but that's very hard. And then email them in their own time zone. You do not want to email Apple in San Francisco or LA or wherever when they're asleep, because they get, I don't know how many emails a day, and they just cannot sift through that all. So if you email them just when they finished up doing all of their email stuff, like maybe 11 a.m. their time, which is like 8 or 9 in the evening for us, they will probably respond right away. That's how they work. And you'll get added to an iTunes affiliate program, which is nice. It's an added revenue stream you get for pushing traffic to the App Store. So that's nice. We actually, you get like a percentage of everything somebody spends on the App Store after you send them there. It's just nice. It's just cool. All right, handy stuff. These 3, TestFlight I already talked about. PressKit is really nice. It's something Rami put together. And App Annie, that's a website that tracks rating and stuff about iOS apps. You can check when apps were released. You can check where they're featured. So if you suddenly see a big mark in downloads, you're like, how the hell did that happen? Hopefully, if you're a bit of a cynic like I am, you will always find positive things you have happened somewhat suspicious. You'll be like, okay, why is this happening? And hopefully you find out that it's something that you did, because then you can reproduce it. You know? That's a good idea. But App Annie is a really good system, because we saw like, okay, we suddenly have 2,000% more downloads in Germany. How did that happen? And it just turns out that we're added to some extra feature list. Just very nice. Okay, so in conclusion, the basics were make a quality game and figure out what that means. That's a very important one. Consider your audience, do your own quality assurance, and do it well and often. Don't just do it at the end, do it all the time. Know your hooks, how to keep people interested, keep them reading more. Follow the guidelines, use the latest features if they're useful for your game. And pick your launch date well, and don't get caught with your pants down, which basically means be ready for anything as much as you can. It will happen, but you know, don't do it twice. Marketing-wise, inform people a lot. Get in touch with press, in person, have consistent materials, make a post-release roadmap, and make it so. Don't just make it and then do whatever. Update sensibly, which I mean consider why you are updating, when you are updating. Don't just update because you need to update. And don't buy users or reviews for that matter, unless it makes sense financially. I would never buy a review for that matter. That's just, I think it's a shady practice. People will contact you about this. And don't stop there. Learn to understand the impulse crowd, if that is the crowd you're going for. That's something we've been trying to do. It's a good idea to look at everybody and their mom. If you have questions, it's right after this. Get to know the value of your product. Ask the right people for reviews, not the wrong people. Be ready for haters and fans. There will be fans, hopefully. And spam is a sign of success. If you get spammed, that means you did something right. Or you left your email at the wrong place. Hopefully you didn't do that. All right, so any questions?
If the viewers contact you about a review and you can pay for it, do you ignore them or do you search back?
We very sternly, actually my colleague has a system that legally prevents them from contacting you again, which basically he emails them one word back, and that word is unsubscribe. That forces them to remove that email address from their mailing list. If they don't do that, they're basically crossing some legal boundary.
Just the word unsubscribe?
Just the word unsubscribe words. I've tried saying very kindly that we don't think it's a good practice, and then 2 weeks later they'll email somebody else at our computer. What? They're very persistent. I didn't reply to their emails 3 days in a row because I was just not at work. And I got like 10 emails in the intermittent periods. But yeah, that's pretty much what we do. Any other questions?
Are you doing any App Store SEO?
SEO, what does that stand for?
As in your text and keywords when you're submitting to the App Store?
We try to just come up with everything. We have like, I don't know, 50 keywords. We make basically as many keywords as we can that are relevant. And various combinations as such, and then all combinations separately as well. That's what we basically do.
And is there any tools you're using to, because I believe that in the App Store you can only update your keywords when whenever you do an update.
When you release, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't generally update our keywords unless we add significant new content that needs to be in the keywords, but we don't usually do that. So far that hasn't been necessary at least. Any other questions about anything? Yeah?
It's a bit unrelated, but for the game Gold Diggers,
Mhm.
you used the names of existing Gold Diggers. Did you get
Is that so?
No,
Did we?
base them on.
I based well, yeah, we based the image on what we thought were gold diggers. I mean, we have Claire, who looks a
So
bit
they were
like
not
Paris
really,
Hilton. They were not literally like gold diggers, but we basically took the archetypes, like the rich guy, the redhead from, I don't know, the gold rush era, and Paris Hilton. That's basically what we did. So yeah, it's recognizable. That's what we went for. Any other questions?
There's a question over here.
Yeah, is there a reason why you picked iOS over Android?
It was easier to get into at the time, and to be perfectly honest, we're just getting into Android at the moment, and we're having a harder time getting into it than we did with iOS. Mostly because in iOS we started with a publisher. If you're starting for the first time, you will get screwed with the deal, but that's okay. First time's always like that. But it's a good idea to start with a publisher because they can teach you a lot about how to approach that market. And we still use that information to this day. So. The biggest problem that we're having going into Android is that we don't have a publisher that only wants to publish Android because we already do everything else. So if we do the full package, yeah, we want to publish everything with you, then we can get Android in on it. But now we're really approaching Android on just a solo basis, which is completely different. And it's a very different market. Any other questions?
I have a question. You started out with you need a quality game,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to figure out what it means.
Yeah.
What does it mean? And maybe looking back at, you've made a couple of games so far. Did you have a sense with some of these games that some would be more successful than others, based on your sense of what quality means?
Yes and no. I always had the feeling that Scrap Tank would have problems appealing to users, and it did for wide mass market audiences. The great thing about Scrap Tank is that it is very financially stable and will eventually be successful financially because it has a very loyal user base, and that's because it's more of a core game. It doesn't really go for the huge audience thing, which you really don't have to do. You just have to know your audience well, and if it is a niche market, know where they are, what they want, and and appeal to that. And in terms of quality, I think there's different things. There's novelty, how original is the idea, but it's also execution. Because if you have a really great idea and you execute it poorly, people might be able to look through that, but mass market audience are not like that. They do not accept any fault, basically. So your execution has to be near flawless, and then you can basically have enough novelty to be interesting, and then quality becomes very subjective. That's what it is. It's an experience, so it's basically talking about experience.
Any other questions? No more questions? All right.
All right.
So let's give applause to our